All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to decode the 50 states. But we're not just looking at the US as one big country. Oh no, we're looking at it as 50 different experiments in democracy, all running at the same time. And now, for really the first time in history, we have the data to see what's actually working.
Have you ever thought about how you can cross a state line, just an imaginary line on a map, and suddenly the rules completely change? It's wild, right? These aren't just little quirks. They're huge differences in law and public policy. To really get why, we have to stop thinking of states as just places on a map and start seeing them as individual experiments in how to run a society.
So that brings us to our first big idea. 50 states, 50 laboratories. The concept is actually pretty simple. The U.S. system is set up to give states the power to be these unique laboratories of democracy, where they can try out their own laws and policies to see what sticks.
But here's the thing. For decades, there was this massive problem. While all 50 of these experiments were chugging along, we couldn't actually compare the results in any meaningful way. Think about it. We were getting tons of data on the presidency, on Congress. That all became pretty widely available. But for the states, researchers were kind of stuck. They might have a really high-quality study on, say, California, or maybe a few states in the South. But they just didn't have the tools to see the big picture across all 50. And that really held back our understanding for a long, long time.
And this timeline just lays it all out so clearly. You can see the study of national politics just taking off in the 60s and 70s, but state-level research, it basically hit a wall. For decades, the data was just too hard to find, and even when you found it, it was a mess, totally inconsistent. You couldn't compare apples to apples. Then, right around the year 2000, everything changed. The internet became widespread, and that was the turning point.
And when I say it changed, I don't mean a small shift. This was a full-blown revolution in how we study the states, and it was all driven by a massive explosion of data. Honestly, I think this quote just nails it. The keyword here is explosion. This wasn't a slow trickle of new info. The amount of data available to researchers grew exponentially, and that set the stage for everything we're about to talk about. And here is the direct result. Before this data revolution, trying to analyze all 50 states at once was this monumental, almost impossible task. Now, it's quickly becoming the standard. We can finally compare all 50 experiments side by side. So that leads to the obvious question. Where is all this incredible data? Well, think of the guide we're using for this explainer as your own personal treasure map.
See, this guide isn't just some boring list of websites. No, it's an entry point. It's a map that shows us where to start digging for info on literally everything, from campaign finance to health policy. It points you right to the gold mines of data.
And here's the fun part. The guide points out that when you start poking around in these databases, you often stumble upon unexpected treasures. You might go in looking for one specific thing and come out with a completely new insight, all because you found data you never even knew was out there. I mean, just look at the sheer breadth of what's available. This is just a tiny, tiny sample. You want to know who's funding political campaigns where you live? There's a source for that. How do your state's court caseloads stack up against others? Yep, there's data for that too. From health policy to economic data, it's all out there.
Okay, so we know the data exists. Fantastic. But what can we actually learn from it? What happens when we put all 50 of these experiments under the microscope together?
You know, one of the most fascinating things this data lets us do is watch ideas spread across the country like wildfire. A policy gets tested in one state, and if it works, or if it's just really popular, it starts to diffuse, to spread to other states. We saw this with welfare reform, with smoking bans, and we're seeing it happen right now with things like marijuana legalization. These state-level debates have a way of setting the entire national agenda.
And get this. This comparison just blows my mind. It shows such a fundamental difference between the federal government and the states. The U.S. Constitution is like stone. It is incredibly hard to change. But state constitutions, they're more like living documents. Alabama has amended its constitution over 700 times. 700! That just shows you how much more flexible and adaptable states can be.
And that flexibility leads to these massive differences in the very structure of government. For example, federal judges, they're appointed for life. But a lot of states actually elect their judges, making them directly accountable to voters. Some governors have a power called a line item veto to strike out parts of a budget, which gives them immense leverage. Others don't. And get this, in some states, being a lawmaker is a low-paying part-time gig, which completely changes who can even afford to run for office.
Every single one of these choices creates a totally different style of government.
So let's bring it all home. We've seen that the data is finally out there and that it reveals these deep, profound differences between the states. So, what does this all mean for you?
Here's the most important thing to take away from all of this. This information is not locked away in some ivory tower anymore. This data revolution has made it available to everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a student, a journalist, or just someone who's curious and wants to understand your own state a little better. These tools are for you.
And really, that's the bottom line. This isn't just some abstract political science exercise. It's about understanding the forces that shape your community, your neighborhood, and your daily life. The treasure map is in your hands now. The data's out there. So the only question left is, what will you find?